Hi, everybody. We're just chatting as you're coming on. I just think it's so important to keep ramping up our connection to God.
Get it to him.
Hi, Gila. Hi, Sulin, Chaya, Vanessa, Rosemary, Jillian, Christina, Linda, Soteria. Hi, Sarah from Morristown. Deborah, yeah. Hi to everybody. And I'm just going to keep reminding you that if you feel you're getting value from these conversations, please invite other people. And before we actually officially welcome Rabbi Simon, I just want to say that I feel it's important for us. Simon is going to have a lot to offer in information, also in calls to action, things that we can do. Feel free to ask your questions. We'll see how many we get to, where the flow takes us. But I want to say also that I think it's really important to see ourselves as kind of homeopathic drops in the system of humanity. Like, well, there's no way that one person is going to directly reach 8 billion people. And even if somebody does, like, let's say, a very powerful political figure, it's not like everybody is available to hear or to receive. Everybody's in a different place. I think that if we can, each of us, have the intention throughout this next 4 days and throughout in general, that we want to refine and connect ourselves as deeply as we possibly can, as deeply as we humanly and superhumanly can, to God, to our souls, to the potential of the times, to the goodness of humanity, to the truth, to the destruction of evil and the shining forth of good. Our vibration, one person's vibration and intention, literally can change the world. And I think that that's the way we need to look at it. So yeah, the more people that participate, the better. But in a way, I think it's even more important that one of us, meaning you, meaning me, truly lean into our full God connection and our full soul connection as deeply and as powerfully and as purely as we can, and then see what comes out of us through there. Anyway, I wanted to say that, and let me introduce our first speaker, Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Just going to be brief. He's the founder and director of the Meaningful Life Center, the author of the best-selling book, Toward a Meaningful Life. In his work across the board, he presents to people of all backgrounds the universal teachings of Torah, which is the divine mandate for humanity, as a blueprint for life. And the next thing that I want to say is that for over 14 years, and many of you know this, Rabbi Simon Jacobson was responsible for publishing the talks of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he was the head of a team of scholars that would memorize and transcribe whole talks that the Rebbe gave during Shabbat and the holidays, which meant that people were not able to record or to write at those times, so they would have to memorize them, recapture, create references, footnotes, and to give those talks to the Rebbe to edit and to respond. So Simon had this position, and that gives him an extremely unique, there's such a thing, a unique and so important lens on the Rebbe's mind, the Rebbe's philosophy, the Rebbe's perspective. And that's a huge part of what I hope, Simon, you'll be sharing with us during this conversation. So if we could start with just a little prayer, just for people to connect.
So first of all, thank you for having me, especially in these trying and challenging times, where we're all united as one, men, women, and children, in the Holy Land, wherever we may be in the world. So yes, I think it's appropriate to begin with a prayer, which is focused especially on the people of Israel, but really for Jews everywhere and for all decent human beings on earth. I thought appropriate prayer, I'll say it in Hebrew first and then translate into English, is from Psalm 121, Psalm from King David, that is so fitting for our times. So we say, Shir Lamailos Ese Eine Alaharim Ma'ayin Yovi Ezri. A song of ascents, I lift my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? Ezri im Hashem, Eisa Shemayim va'aretz. My help will come from the Lord, creator of heaven and earth. Al yitin lomed raglecha al yonum shemrecha. He will not let your foot falter. Your guardian does not slumber. Hine layonum v'layishon Shem Yisrael. Indeed, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Hashem Shemrecha, Hashem Tzilcha Yad Minecha. The Lord is your guardian, the Lord is your protective shade at your right hand. Yemem Hashemesh Layakikev Yereich Balayla. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. Hashem Yishmarcha Machol Ra, Yishmer Es Nafshecha. The Lord will guard you from all evil. He will guard your soul. Hashem Yishmer Seischa Uvayecha Ma'ata V'Adelam. The Lord will guard your going and your coming from now and for all time. Amen. Amen. So nothing more fitting than that. The fact of the matter is, we are here for almost 4,000 years, the Jewish people, Am Yisrael Chai.
Amen.
And the reason for that is because, yes, we were blessed with wits, with intelligence, with resilience, but above all, with God. And a God that protects us, that watches over us, even in challenging times. We need God more than ever. And you see that awakening in the Tzahal, our holy military, and people just coming together, recognizing that when you're bound above, you don't fall below, and we shall prevail.
Amen. Okay, I have a lot of questions. I'm sure we won't get to all of them, but before we start with that, can you, sorry, I'm turning that off. Can you just share your perspective? Like, where are you? What are you seeing? What are you thinking? Did you expect anything like this, even remotely? If not like this, just share as honestly as you're willing to, how things are for you and how they've been.
Well, this is the time for raw honesty. There's no holds barred. No, I was not expecting this. I'm shocked and frankly disturbed, as every one of us. You know, we all know exactly where we were October 7th in the morning. I was in California by my daughter. It was Shmini Atzeret in Israel. Shmini Atzeret Simchas Torah was that Saturday, that Shabbat. And as the news came in, it got worse and worse, frankly. And it was not pleasant to hear, obviously. But I'll tell you immediately for myself, I share with you completely, candidly. You know, I feel like a soldier. I feel I was trained for this. In a sense, you mentioned the Rabbi, Bavitcher Rebbe. I sat at his feet for a big part of my life, absorbing his teachings, watching and seeing a master at work. The Rebbe was a real commander-in-chief. Remember, a war is a physical war and also a spiritual war. So I felt literally like mobilized. I felt I got to do something. It was still a holiday. So I remember as soon as the holiday ended, it was Sunday night in LA, where I was. Immediately, I went right into the sukkah. I took my phone and I just shared from a heart-to-heart message. I have a platform, thank God, many people listen. And I basically said, look, this is a challenging moment. You know, it was the news was horrendous and it was only getting worse. But at the same time, this is where we have to rise to the occasion. What made Jews always most powerful this is the secret of our survival, is that we can look at the enemy in its eyes. We can see the darkness of the abyss, and we don't get frightened, and we don't retreat, and we don't cower in fear. You know what we do? We dig deeper with God's help, and we become the best we can possibly be. And I really feel that right now. I feel as we speak, I'm like, you know, all the passion and all the anger, frankly, has to be harnessed into nothing less than a passionate global revolution of goodness and kindness. Now is the time for a Jew to shine. You know, I don't know who, I would like to put it this way. The Jewish people are like a tea bag. You don't know how strong they are until you put them into hot water. And our enemies, they thought they chose a day when we're vulnerable and unprepared, Simchas Torah. It's actually the day that celebrates Jewish indestructibility, that even after the breaking of the tablets, and even after terrible events, Yom Kippur and then Simchas Torah demonstrates that we cannot ever be destroyed. So to me, this is like that type of moment. We didn't ask for this. We didn't want this. A lot of pain. Their family shattered. We're not going to dismiss or minimize that. But there's a bigger story, and the bigger story is you and I. What are we going to do? And I honestly, all my life, I've never seen such a wake-up call, both for the Jewish people and frankly for the world. A clarity, a moral clarity. What is right? What is wrong? What is a Jew?
Among some, there's a great fog.
No, okay, of course, and that's what we'll talk about exactly. But I'm talking about for those of us that see, what does it mean to be a Jew? How many Jews are today saying, "Come, I want to understand what it means to be Jewish," and why are we in the Holy Land? And it's not just about don't kill us, don't kill our children. We are here for thousands of years, children of Abraham, to bring light, to bring a message of justice, of tzedakah, virtue. We brought civilization to the world. And you know what? We can get complacent. Unfortunately, it takes tragedy sometimes to wake people up. So these are my raw, from the heart feelings that we have here, this double-edged thing. We have tremendous sorrow for what's happened, but tremendous strength in knowing that we have a job to do, a mission to do, not just to eradicate evil, but to bring a more powerful good. Our passion for love should be deeper than their passion for hatred.
I'll say amen to that, but I don't think it's only about love. I think there's, if one word would resonate with me besides God, it would be truth. And what I'm seeing, I am seeing and feeling a rising. I also have a provocative question or a something question to ask you in a second. I hope that's okay. But I do see and feel a tremendous rising up and waking up, at least of the Jews here. I'm not as connected with what's going on outside of Israel. At the same time, and people are incredibly courageous, incredibly. It's like it's inspired and uplifted me so much because I'm not that courageous. So seeing, other Jews running to the front or not, happily, whatever they're doing, raising money, making sandwiches for soldiers, having barbecues, running prayer gatherings or whatever, and just trying to overhaul ourselves in the way that we see each other and life. That's incredibly inspiring. It does give me a sense of being one people, because what other people are feeling affects me so strongly. But I won't say that. I mean, I think everybody must be dealing with fear on some level, even though it's interesting that interesting, strange, who knows, it's become more quiet, even though just a few minutes ago, there was a lot of artillery fire all day. There's been artillery fire. There's some kind of launching sites very near us. We're in the north and they are launching at Lebanon. And today there was, a hit, like nobody knows what the escalation is going to be, where it's going to be. Anyway, I want to ask you this question. And that is, I'm going to ask it in two different ways. First, straight about the Rebbe. One of the things that brought me out of my initial fear to a large degree was watching videos of the Rebbe, like before the Gulf War, or after the or right at the beginning of the Yom Kippur War. And I know this from my own life, that the Rebbe was always so clear about the miracles that would happen in Israel, and about this. I thought I turned that off. About the safety that would happen, that would be present for people, and about the need to trust, and nobody should cancel their trip to be here. Nobody should run away. But together with that, we never had anything like what happened. So people, I think one of the thoughts that people have had, or the questions that people have had, is our protection in any way mitigated? God forbid. Now, I feel that an incredible amount of miraculous protection again now, but I want to know what you think about that. Does everything the Rebbe said in all the previous wars, does it still apply? And the other part of this question is, and maybe it's a different perspective, but a lot of people have said that because of the lack of unity, because of the demonstrations for judicial reform and against judicial reform, that somehow we brought the breach on ourselves. It's hard for me to believe that, because most people were just out there expressing what they felt is right for the country. Is that what unity means? That you all is it conformity? Everybody has to say the same thing. Nobody can protest. There are other things that I maybe won't say, but it's hard for me to believe that this was just happened by itself, with all the fail-safes Israel has. So like, how much do we just go on smiling and say everybody's good? And how much do we have to really seek out and call out where there might be evil, even I learned a sikha from the Rebbe once where he talked about how there will be the prophecy of Micha was from Balak from 1963, where he talked about how there will be in the first part of Geula, there will be evil not only outside of the Jewish people, but inside of the Jewish people. I know we don't want to harp on that, but I'm sure people have these questions. So if you're still willing to lay it all on the table, answer.
I'll lay it all on the table in a very blunt way.
Okay.
So first of all, yes, we had a horrendous atrocities that happened on Shmini Atzeret Simchas Torah, October 7th, as it's being called. And we don't like to compare tragedies. But look, 80 years ago, 6 million Jews were massacred. 1/3 of our people. And the same question you can ask, where was God? Where was the protection? His chosen people. We just read, God watches over us day and night. And there were many, many good Jews, all good Jews, but many extremely devout Jews. So let me just say this, and I think it's critical to understand. We don't know God's mysterious ways. The idea of trying to point fingers at yourself or at anyone else is not a Jewish approach. It's just not Jewish. Let me quote Maimonides. Maimonides says, when a catastrophe happens, it would be cruel and insensitive to see it as a random event. What we need to do is to soul search, introspection, but not start looking for a cause. Maybe this happened, that happened. Look inside your soul. Since you're here on earth and you've witnessed it or experienced it, you need to do everything possible because that's how the world works. When you mend or correct something within yourself, it has an effect on the entire world. But I think you have to be very careful. It's very dangerous to start saying the 6 million Jews, they were killed because there was assimilation, or here there was rifts. Yes, there were rifts in our community. Yes, all of us are not perfect, including me and you and everyone on this program. But that's not the Jewish way. The Jewish way is saying, here's what happened. We don't understand why to be brutalized, and so on. Anyone that tries to explain that, and so on, is not. So my answer to the question is this. The Rebbe was a man of Torah, a man of God. He said clearly, it's not just what he's saying. He's quoting a verse. There's a verse in the Torah that says that the Holy Land has particular hashgacha, particular supervision of God's. God watches over this land all the time. Now you'll say, 1 second, so why were there any terrorist attacks? Even one person being hurt is already, we don't know the answer to that, but the verse still stands. What made the Jews so powerful was that despite setbacks and despite not understanding, our faith was never shaken. But I'm not judging anyone. I understand why people's faith would be shaken. It's totally legitimate, and I want to validate it. But that's why we dig deeper. We dig deeper, and the Rebbe, being a man of God, you think, of course he was pained when he saw whatever he saw, but then he was calling upon himself and upon all of us, we got to dig deeper. When we were in Egypt, the verse says in the Torah that the more they were oppressed, the more they thrived, the more they flourished, because that's the way. We don't understand the world. There's so much injustice. There's so many people hurt. There are deaths. There are tragedies. There are no answers to these questions. So the answer ultimately is there are many miracles in Israel. There are many miracles right now. The miracle that you and I are here. The miracle that all of us have life. But the miracle does not in any way so-called cancel out the tragedy. We cry over it. We complain to God even, and we demand that God be just and God be kind and gracious in a revealed way. We fight the wars we need to fight with the enemy. But at the end of the day, we are not going to be defined by the pain and the suffering. We're not going to be defined by our enemies. We're going to be defined that we have a divine mandate and calling, that no matter what happens, we are continuing to forge ahead and be that holy nation that God wants us to be. Now you could say, 1 second, if God lets us down, why are we still committed? But that's a sign of eternity. You know, I remember hearing from quite a few Holocaust survivors telling me, I said, how could you sing the song Ani Mamin, I believe with complete faith, Shema, Kaddish, while you're being marched to the gas chambers? How's that possible? It sounds like ridiculous. It sounds like there's a time that the Jews could have been so angry at God. Where are you? You like abandon us. And yet they continue to praise God. They continue to thank God. So it either sounds delusional, it sounds like escapism, or something. But the fact of the matter is, and this is the answer, and I think everyone needs to hear this, is extremely important. What the Jews were saying, no, we're not delusional. We know exactly what's happening to us. And we're crying, we're losing our children, we're losing our lives. But we're declaring for now and forever as follows. You can take our lives, but you can't take our faith. You can take our bodies, but you can't take our soul. And if it won't be us, it will be our children. And if it won't be our children, it will be our grandchildren. We will prevail. That's what they were saying. They were in a place where they did not have control over their physical destiny, but they had control over their spiritual destiny. And look, everyone after the Holocaust said, the Jewish people are over with. Give them 20, 30 more years, they're gone. Read the obituaries of 1945. But it didn't happen because it never happened. Not after the Babylonians, and after the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Greeks, the Persians, Haman, the Romans. I mean, I could go the whole list. Why? Because we have something more powerful than any darkness. And that is our connection to what we believe in. And that's exactly what has kept us together. We say it by the Seder, we say it in so many prayers, that in every generation we have our enemies, but we stand strong with God. So what the Rebbe was saying is a true leader, like a commander-in-chief. Yes, we had a setback, but we're not stopping the battle. We're not retreating. You know, what does a commander-in-chief do? We can't do it this way, we'll go that way. And the Rebbe led the Jewish people by making that statement that Israel remains God's promised land and holy land, and it will happen. Didn't happen yet. You know, we had a setback. We pray for it. We complain. I'm not in any way suggesting it's not a setback when a person dies, but we still forge ahead. And I think it is a paradox in some way, but that's the way. I mean, I don't see an alternative. I mean, Shifra, you could talk about your own personal life if you want to, but I don't see an alternative. The other alternative is to sink and give up and resignation.
No,
So
yeah, no, we're in a very, very, sinking is not an option, especially,
Right.
you know, it's really interesting when we look at, I have so much to say, when we look at the videos of like 1 million haters, Jew haters, humanity haters, like rising up in the streets of giant cities. And at first I was so appalled, and I mean, I'm still appalled, but I had this kind of flash of insight the other day where it seemed like this has to be part of what has to happen, that people get shown for who they really are. I think that's part of the sifting process. I mean, it boggles the mind that this could happen, yet I know that there are prophecies about this, about a lot of what we see. I don't want to get lost. I have several questions, and I'm sure you have other things that you want to share as well, but and if there are questions from the listeners, feel free to share them. We'll get to them if we can. But do you personally feel that when the Rebbe, like I'm thinking of the Gulf War, when there were Scud missiles that landed on buildings and nobody was hurt, that sort of thing. Do you feel like this said that from 67 onward, that we didn't have to be afraid, that it can't be possible that in the process toward redemption, we're going backwards? Even if this is not the road that we expected to be driving on right now.
No, there's no going backwards. You can't go backwards. That's not a possibility. That's a given. I don't want to cut you off. Finish your question.
No, it just has to. It seems like it has to be. It seems that the miraculous protection, despite what happened, has to be more than it was during the Gulf War, because we're that many more years ahead in the Geula process.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is 1,400 innocent people were killed. So that's a fact.
Right.
There are right now soldiers at risk, and unfortunately some have also been killed.
Yeah.
So I don't think you and I or anybody can just say absolutely nothing. We forge ahead does not mean that there may not be some losses. Rahman al-Islam. We pray that there shouldn't be. But I don't think that anyone going into this has to remember, with all of God's promises, with all the Rebbe's assurances and so on, we still live in a world where there's darkness. And I don't think we need proof for that. So the fact of the matter is, you could say why God allows darkness. It's a fair question. But at the end of the day, there's a battle to be fought. And you know what? The same Rebbe that said is the safest place also said you have to do everything possible to protect yourself. He didn't just say, everyone stay home and God will protect you. No, he was extremely adamant that we have to protect every inch of our land and every human being, because the fact is you have enemies. But the key thing to remember, it's not either or. You can have complete faith even in a time of darkness. And to just react to the issue of backwards, and we don't go backwards. It's a question of, as you said, how we get there. I absolutely will tell you that I believe the Persian Gulf War in 1991, which we're talking about 32 years ago, 33 years ago, the Rebbe was doing everything he can that should be the last war. And that would lead us right into the redemption. The only way, I can't explain it, but the only way I can understand what I see now is a continuation of that story. And for some reason, maybe it's we didn't do what we had to do, because that Rebbe also said we have to do something. Open your eyes. We talked about, I did everything I can, do what you can, regardless. And again, I'm not pointing fingers, but something did not finish the narrative. And in many ways, I see now, because it's the same Bnei Yishmael that we're reading about in the chapters, it's the same end of days that we'll talk about these confrontations. So I really see this maybe the end of the story that began with the Persian Gulf War, which was mild compared to this, if you can call it that. Right. And so I do see that, and therefore, going back to those talks that he delivered in 1990 and 1991, 92, all of them are extremely valid now. But I will say, and trust me, I know many detractors, many questions been asked, well, it didn't happen then. How do you know it's going to happen now? Of course, that's a natural inclination to become skeptical or even cynical and to become more passive. But as I said, I was trained by the best. The end of the day is, when you're in the military, you cannot afford to say, hey, we lost yesterday's battle. Let's not say we lost. There was a setback yesterday, so we're giving up. It's not an option. We are soldiers, and soldiers must march forward. And sometimes it doesn't work exactly as we wanted it to be. You can sit and analyze it. I mean, talk right now is a time for action, to be honest. That's why I wouldn't dwell on how did it happen, what caused it. I would dwell on what are we doing now? We're united. Let's make sure this unity lasts, is sustained. Let's turn it into both a strong, do what you have to do with the enemy, and at the same time, a strong, ongoing connection to God, to Torah, to mitzvot, to all the spiritual weapons that we need to win battles as well.
And yeah, that's actually the topic title for this conversation is how to win the war, the battle for humanity, and how to win the war. Right. Can you talk about the Yalkut Shimoni at this point? You Absolutely. More or less brought it up. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to broaden it even more than the Yalkut Shimoni, but I'll bring that in as well, if you don't mind. Let me just say this. For some people, this may be, I don't know, reassuring. It's possible. It still doesn't take away from the challenges we have in the battles, but there is a hidden choreography that is taking place, a narrative. You know, we want it to be a painless, bloodless, and God forbid, not with any deaths and casualties. But there is a narrative, and it's critical to know this. When you look in the Bible, I'm talking now Torah, and it's interesting, of all things, these weeks, in these chapters, you have all the seeds planted and all the characters, so to speak, the archetypes, if you wish, that foresee events that will happen till the end of days, including now. I'll just begin with one because we just read it in the Torah yesterday. We read Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. At the end of the chapter in Life of Sarah, it talks about Abraham passing away, and then how Yishmael, remember Abraham had two children, Yishmael and Isaac, and Yitzchak. They did not get along. Sarah was the one that insisted, send away Yishmael. And now Abraham passes away, Yishmael returns. And we're told Yishmael did tshuva. He did tshuva, he repented for whatever it is that he did. And then it continues, the last section of the chapter talks about the children of Yishmael, the progeny, the children of Yishmael. Following that, we begin this week reading the children of Isaac. Literally, Elah told us Yishmael, Elah told us Yitzchak. That's the order. Says the Baal HaTurim, one of the classic commentaries printed in many of the Chumashim that we have. He says, what's the connection? Why suddenly we're talking about Yishmael and Yitzchak? So it says, because after Yishmael will fall, because that's the last word in the chapter, and when in the battles at the end of days, then will be given birth to Ben David, which is Mashiach, Geula, who comes from the children of Isaac. Now, the Baal HaTurim didn't just come up with this. This is based on classic Midrashim and Zohars, which I'll cite a few. You tell me how much you want, and I will.
Yeah, please do.
I can elaborate.
Definitely.
That all talk about that Yishmael and his children, he's the ancestor essentially of the Arab Muslim world. Bnei Yishmael. Not necessarily that they a direct lineage, that you know exactly who, but that's the general. Yitzchak, of course, is the ancestor of the Jewish people. He would give birth to Yaakov and Esav. And Esav, a brother of Jacob, is the third character that's necessary, who is the grandfather of Rome, which is the beginning of the Western Roman Christian civilization. So you have essentially the ancestors of the three major religions, which really covers almost 2/3 of the planet. We can talk about the Far East and the Buddhists and so on, but I don't want to go there right now. And what have they been doing for the last few millennia? Battles after battles. What did Christianity do for almost 2 millennia? Ravaged Europe, including, of course, Jews and so on. So the battles being fought today are not just battles. If you think about it, what are they fighting over? What do they care if Israel, the Jewish people, have a little sliver of land that's smaller than New Jersey, and they have hundreds of thousands of square miles? Why do they care if the Jews have a little piece of land that they just want to live there peacefully? Because it's not a piece of land. It's a holy land. It's a godly, promised land. So you're dealing here with a far deeper story going on that began thousands of years ago, and we're told clearly there will be battles at the end of time. Now, the battles didn't begin in 2023. We know battles not just in 1948 either, when the Ottoman Empire was destroyed at the beginning of the 20th century. I mean, you go back, the battles basically of Christianity, Islam, and everyone wants Jerusalem. Everyone fights for Jerusalem. Are battles that were foretold. That doesn't necessarily minimize the pain that we're suffering, but it's a story. And the end of the story is that we will prevail and God's presence will return to this earth in a revealed way, the most revealed way. And frankly, Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, atheists, everyone will benefit from it. That's the irony of ironies, that there's a powerful medrash that says that if the non-Jewish people knew the blessings they receive from Israel, from Jerusalem, from the Holy Temple, from the Jewish people, not only would they not attack them, they would surround them with legions to protect them because they're getting all their blessings from there. But we'll leave that a little later. Maybe we'll talk about that. So the point is, you referred to, that talks about part of the story, that there will be battles going on in the Middle East. And it talks about the attack that there will be in the Muslim. It says there, in the Arab or Muslim countries, there will be confrontations, and a king from Persia will attack an Arab country or Arab king, and everyone will start being real confused and frightened. What's happening here? The Jewish people, of course, are always in the middle of all these things, will also come running and saying, what's going on? What should we do? And God will then say, I'm sorry, 1 second. God will then say to, are you saying something? Can I?
No, I'm just saying, I'm just saying, and where should we go? Which I've been thinking.
Yeah, where should we go? What should we do? Exactly. And God will say, my children, do not be afraid. Everything that is happening, everything that is going on, I've done for you. Your time of redemption has come. In other words, these upheavals and this turbulence and these disruptions are essentially like the last gasp of the negative of evil in the world, and ultimately it will lead to peace. And the Rebbe cited this medrash, this Yalkut Shmoini, in 1991, because literally the characters, Persia, Iraq, Kuwait, all the characters, but people don't really always know that the Yalkut Shmoini is part of a backdrop. That's why I wanted to elaborate a bit more. It's not just some random medrash that seems to fit the bill. It's part of a bigger story, and I have a lot to say on this. Again, I don't know how much you want me to elaborate on these prophecies, if you wish, or
I think
like
everybody
to call
wants
it the vision.
Yeah, people want to hear about prophecy. I know I do.
Yeah, but the vision, it all goes back to biblical statements. If you go back a few weeks ago, we read about a very cryptic story where God is making his covenant with Abraham. And it says there was this covenant, and it was dark night. The sun was setting, and Abraham had a dread. He was frightened. And it talks about a burning, fiery furnace that he saw. Literally, when you read the verses, it doesn't make any logical sense. And all they all explain, all the Talmudic and the Midrashic and all the interpretations explain that he was shown the empires to come. And he was shown what his children would have to suffer. The Egyptian empire, of course, and then the Babylonian, and I mentioned the Assyrian, the Persian, the Greek, and ultimately the Roman Empire, and then we'll call the Ishmaelite empires, whether it's the Ottomans or the Moors, however you identify them. And that's why he had a dread, because he saw his children being oppressed. And of course, Abraham, as a father, was hurt. And then God said, but the end, it will be that they will leave with great treasure as they left Egypt. And that will be the ultimate end of the story. So really, events of our time have all been foretold. Not the details, and not necessarily that it has to be so barbaric, but that there would be confrontations, that there would be. And that's what the Baal HaTurim, as I quoted. And as I said, there's a lot more to be said about this, because the plot thing is, but just as Yishmael did Shuvah, that's what we're told. He did Shuvah. He repented. So I have no doubt, as strange as this may sound to many today, that ultimately, just like the Christians were tamed, and a country like the United States was born that became a haven for Jews, and just as many aggressors have either been eliminated or have been harnessed to be forces of good, I have no doubt that the Muslim world has that hope as well. And I hope that they understand that. But that doesn't take away the evildoers and the criminals and whatever you want to call them, the barbarians, the savages. That has to be dealt with as well. So I'm not being naive and all this doe-eyed and thinking, oh, all we got to do is bring God to them. There's challenges, there are wars to be fought. But at the end of the day, we have the firm belief that every nation on this earth is going to embrace God. And frankly, talk about the Rebbe, what do you think the Rebbe was talking about in the 80s, prior to the Persian Gulf War? What was he talking about when the Soviet Union bloodlessly fell? He was talking about the universal 7 laws of humanity that prevent the world from becoming a jungle. That's what he said. You take away God, you take away morality. Look what's going on in the academic world. How have they lost their moral compass? Because if you don't have a clear right and wrong, that there are lines that you don't cross, and everything is justified, this moral equivalence, this moral confusion. Everyone, this is the new thing. You go to therapy, there are 2 stories, there's 2 sides to every story. No, there are some things that are not acceptable. Not acceptable to kill an innocent man, woman, and child, period. You have a grievance, there are many ways to air your grievances. We have plenty of grievances. We didn't go back to Germany, the Jewish people, and kill every man, woman, and child there because what they did to us. There are healthy ways to deal with that. So my point is that there's a certain moral compass that's lost. Exactly. To me, when I see what's going on, people marching with savages and for their cause, to me, either they're insane or they have lost sight of morality. And that's that. Sometimes people lose sight. And I think the comforts of the Western world and our prosperity have caused us to become, we live vicariously through Hollywood and through Broadway and through television and through internet. And the reality of life sometimes has eluded many people. And that's also part of the wake-up call, like you said. At least we're getting clarity. What's right? What's wrong? What do you stand for?
It's hard to understand where the level of hatred comes in for people that don't even have a stake in the issue. It's really, really hard to understand. It's almost like a dark force. that's take possess.
But-
It almost looks like possession, I have to say.
Yeah, but just keep in mind this. You're saying because you have a moral compass. But if people growing up as children don't really know what is right and what is wrong, everything can be explained. Everything has some justification.
So
That
go eat
was the
ice cream.
Rebbe's
Why do you have
words.
to why do you have to tear down pictures of pasta?
Going to justify it, and I'm not going to defend them. But I could tell you, in their obscene minds, they have some weird way of processing that.
It's very confusing.
And also, they buy into remember, they're also buying into a false narrative. The false narrative, I don't even want to repeat, is that Israel are the perpetrators, and everything else is fake. I mean, I don't want to there's a propaganda war as well. I'm sure you understand.
Yes, I just really feel like there's some other element to it, something darker that's happened. I mean, if the forces, supernatural forces for good, that whatever. I guess I don't really necessarily want to go there, but
you see that I've never heard from the Rebbe, and I don't see that. With all respect, I don't see that as a Jewish concept. I see it more as a Christian concept, because there's only one God that runs the world, and people have
yeah, of course. But there are people that do evil things. So who says that there aren't?
Okay, but you know what? That I never. You quoted the Rebbe. I never heard from the Rebbe that.
No, I'm not quoting the Rebbe. I'm just saying it's a feeling. I'm not quoting the Rebbe on that, of course.
Okay, fine. I understand.
No. Yeah. So, there's so much to talk about here, but I just feel like I want to bring this up.
No, the reason I challenge you, I'll tell you why. Because if you start bringing in demonic forces, some force of evil, then what do we do?
Good. We have to do good. We have to do godliness. That's, it's part of a spiritual war. Honestly, I feel like, what was the Erev Rav? What happened when half of the Jewish people that received the Torah came from those who were led by Pharaoh's sorcerers? And what did Pharaoh's sorcerers do? They messed around with what was Egypt about. It was about occult arts. I don't think there's nothing to do. I think that we have to understand that this war has to be fought. Yes, soldiers have to fight it physically, and good people have to support other good people and to help on the ground as much as we can, and we all have to do things spiritually, individually. But I feel like there's some vast forces in the world that we and this is part of what I want to bring out here. I don't really know the answers, but I know there has to be something that we as good and decent people can do, whatever our background, whether we're Jewish or not, that can create a light, a godliness, a wave that will counteract this. Because God did this, it's like the prophecies of Yishmael, you should share with us. But Peri Adam, that he's going to that it's this is all like God created this whole scenario. Also, why does it say that Esau will hate Yaakov till Mashiach? I mean, speak to that. Like some of this you said in the beginning.
I'll speak to it very directly. Let me tell you exactly my understanding.
Okay.
I have to point out the following. I think this is where I want to be really careful. Yes, God runs everything, but you have to remember there's a deeper purpose for existence. You can ask the same question: why did God create good and evil? Why did He create a tree of good and evil? The tree of knowledge of good and evil. Why did He create free will? So you have to go back to the very purpose of existence.
Yes.
And the very purpose of existence is, as I'll use the words of God desired to have a home, a divine home in this material world. And the word is tachtonim. That's the word it said. A home in this dark world. And he describes what does tachtonim mean. Look in chapter 36 in Tanya. Similarly in chapter 6, where he talks about what a dark world means. A dark world means that God concealed His presence, allowing us to have an independent consciousness, allowing us to have free will, and said, here are two paths before you, the path of life and the path of, I'll say it, death, opposite of life. Ubacharta b'chaim, choose life. And I'm giving you resources and I'm giving you intelligence, but you need to choose. I'm giving you the power to choose and you need to do it. I can't do it for you. Could God do it? Of course, He can do anything He wants. He could have also not created the whole thing in the first place, but He did create it that way. So when we choose to ignore and say, oh, God is concealed, and therefore maybe there is no God, or maybe I can do whatever I like, I have my own agenda. So in the beginning, it can sound somewhat innocuous, like, so what? But then you start wandering off the path. And that's what happened at the beginning of the story of the Bible. Adam and Eve transgressed. I will call it in psychological terms the first dissonance between their existence and the purpose of their existence, which is God said, choose and align yourself with my calling. Then God says to Adam, Ayeko, where are you? And the famous question, what do you mean? He didn't know where he was? No, he saw that he had wandered away from, he had betrayed his destiny. Of course, God saw where he was, but he saw that he was not, I don't recognize you. You're not living up to your calling. You know, sometimes you're sitting near someone and you don't feel they're present. You say, right. Where are you? Where's your mind? Where's your heart? I don't feel you're with me. God said this was a partnership. I feel you've gone off. And what happens when a person wanders? First, you veer off the road a little more, and it gets worse and worse and worse. A little infection festers and suddenly becomes a cancer, God forbid. I'm just talking the story of history. And then comes an Abraham after the destruction of the great flood. And Abraham reverses the process and says, no, I don't buy into the pagan, selfish world of self-interest. I recognize there's something greater going on. There's a God somewhere. And he begins to search. And he finally discovers his epiphany that we are created by something greater than ourselves with a calling. And he dedicates his life, a life of virtue. We're here to serve. We're not here to take. We're here to be givers. We're here to give off light. And Abraham, in turn, teaches that to his children. But his children also have challenges. I mentioned Yishmael, Yitzchak, because it's not so simple. How do you integrate transcendence and materialism? How do you integrate spirituality and materialism? We all know this struggle. Self-interest and the higher purpose. This has been the struggle of humanity. Now, when it gets really bad, self-interest turns into hatred. It turns into war. It turns into injustices. You know, the big question is this. If God created all of us as human beings, we're all part of one family. We're all one organism. How could one part of the organism attack another? That's the question. So the Arizal, the great mystic, the Arizal, that was in Sfat, answers the question in the words of the Tzimtzum, because God concealed his presence. We don't see, we don't feel we're one organism. So that's how bizarre it gets, that I could end up hurting someone when I'm really hurting myself. And that's the root of all divisiveness and all divisions and ultimately all forms of discrimination and all inhumanities. And when it gets the worst possible, you have a Holocaust. Worst possible, you have a October 7th. And our job is to realign it. Obviously, to do whatever is possible to eradicate evil. We don't turn the other cheek. That's not our approach. You have to eradicate the cancer, no question. But ultimately, we need to get it back aligned to where it was meant to be. So the battles between Yishmael and Yitzchak, between Yaakov and Esau, these are all foretelling what will happen. When you mentioned Esau Seiner Yaakov. This did not happen. This happened in Rebecca's pregnancy. Rivka is pregnant with twin boys, and they're battling with each other. And she asked God, why is my pregnancy so difficult? And Hashem says to her, because you have two nations within you. That's what he says, two nations. They're not just individuals. They represent two world philosophies. They represent two perspectives, two outlooks. One is materialistic. Esau would be a warrior, a warrior. And Jacob would be the spiritual one, the man of the books. Yaakov Ishtam, the pure one. And there will be a battle. The battle, the Rabbi Shneur Zalman says in Tanya, is the battle between your animal soul and your divine soul. And yes, God set it up. They will hate each other. There's hatred. Why? Because the material world does not want to be told to be ethical. Ask a person who's selfish or narcissistic. They're not interested in being kind and gentle. They're interested in me. So at the root of it, that is where it comes from. Ultimately, anti-Semitism root is a cosmic hatred of the material world against the divine.
Okay, this is really... Go ahead.
The goal is not just to vanquish the material world, it's to harness it. That's what God says. Don't destroy the material world. Learn to educate it, train it to become a partner with you in making a dira b'tachtenim, a home for me in this material world. That's in a nutshell, if you wish, the bigger picture. But
I want to make sure people understand even the pasuk that Esav will hate Yaakov, the Jewish people, Jacob, and I've heard until Mashiach comes, and I've heard that it's a halacha.
It says halacha hi biyadua. That's what Rashi says. It's a known halacha, a known rule, if you wish. It's a known
like a principle of creation that.
Yes,
but
that's the root of it. That's the root of it. The root of it is that there is a inherent tension between matter and spirit, if you want to put it in more, I guess, poetic terms.
Or hedonism and morality, or moral system.
Now remember, this does not mean that the nations of the world have to be hedonistic.
Right.
They also have laws that God gave them. Remember, Esav is also a son of Isaac and a grandson of Abraham. That's what's interesting here. It's not just, good and evil. Esav also had choices.
Why do you think God did set it up like this? Let me clarify the question. And a listener asked also, like, what does it mean that the Jews are the chosen people? So you talk about these three nations. You talked about two, but there are three representing, or three.
I did think about three.
Yeah, that
Ishmael, Isaac, and Esav. Yeah.
That are representing different philosophies, different maybe realms of creation, like you said, spirit versus matter.
Right.
Yes, so that would be Esav and Yaakov. Then what is Yishmael representing, and why would God set it up in the beginning that there would be this dynamic tension rather than what is the point? It's like I keep seeing that the world is created in a state of war, and why is that? And then also, what does it mean that the Jewish people are the chosen people? A lot of a lot of Jews have a problem with that.
All these very light, shallow questions. I'm just being
time for shallow. It's a time to be shallow.
No, God forbid. I meant that actually. Just
I know. I know.
Very profound. So let's take one at a time. One at a time. Divide and conquer. So first of all, the why. The why. That's the big why. And interestingly, I don't want to get too much into we'll call it the Haskalah, the philosophy of Chassidus and so on. But the Baal HaTanya, in his brilliance, he talks about that God desired, he used the word nesava, God desired to have a home in this lowest of worlds. So of course, the first question is why? What does he get from it? What does he gain from creating a world of darkness that conceals his presence, where we can have free will, and sometimes, unfortunately, choose the wrong path and hurt everybody, and hurt people. And you have tragedies, and you have this and that. So he emphasizes the word nesava. You have to remember that God is not bound by logic. The fact that we can ask why is only after God created the laws of logic. So you're asking why. God is not defined by why. That's why the word nesava plays a critical role. It means he desired. And the Alter Rebbe says, and a desire, afatayven ishtok in kasha is his. Now, of course, when we say desire on God, we have to qualify that it's not anthropomorphic, that God just suddenly some type of temptation or some type of desire, like you have a desire, you want to eat some ice cream, God forbid. It's just trying to put it in words that there are things that we do not have an answer for. That's the way. There's expressions in some Hasidic discourses. Why God desired, we don't know. We know what he desired. So I don't have an answer for this question. This is the big question that Job, Eve, and all good men and women have always asked God. Why? Why do innocent people suffer? Why do you even allow for suffering? But at the end of the day, it's part of the mystery that existence, God, for some reason or no reason, wanted to have partners that giving us a gift. The only way, you can ask the same question when you have children. You have children, I have children, we all have children, grandchildren. Your child starts walking. You could hold your child, make sure they never fall. But we all know that if you don't let the child walk on their own, they'll never learn to walk. So you're there for them. You say, I'm here, come walk to Tati, to Mommy. But you have to let them fall until they learn to walk on their own. Same thing when your children go off to school. They go, or they get married and build their own lives. They're going to make some mistakes in their life. And you as a parent, you don't want to say, 1 second, I can teach you and prevent mistakes. But we know that you have to allow them a certain autonomy, independence. You give them all the support you can. So using that as an analogy, if God truly wanted to give us the greatest gift, can't do it for us. But there is the possibility. What happens if your child makes a big mistake? And then you say, oh, well, you know what? I should never have let them go off on their own. I should have kept them in my kitchen, in my home, and never let them marry, because it's full of risks. I'm just using human analogies. The point is that the concealment of the divine, as Hasidic teachings, is God saying, I'm concealing myself in order to elicit your ingenuity to find me. That way your life has purpose. Because if you're just a robot or a puppet, it has no purpose. I remember.
That way you're. Go ahead.
Sorry. I remember 1979. It was the 15th of Shvat. And the Rebbe, it's actually a video. I don't know if it's a video, but there's definitely a recording. It's heart-wrenching. The Rebbe speaks about this example. He says the Maggid of Mizrich gave the example of a father hiding from his child in order to elicit his ingenuity, the child. But the father is quite brilliant. He hid himself well. That's what the Rebbe said. He hid himself well to the point that the child can't find him. And he's looking, and he's looking, and he's looking. The Rebbe said then with tears. Sunday he looked. Monday he's looking. Tuesday he's looking. He says, and he can't find his father. So who's responsible? He says the father is hidden. He hid himself so well. What do you want from the child? He's looking for you. But you hid yourself so well from us, it's hard to find you. In a way, it was like talking to God. Is the shears of expression in Yiddish. How much do you want from us? We're looking for you. We're trying our best. How much do you want? But the point is, we cry over this concealment. But the key is to know the concealment is meant actually as a benefit to us, but it has the other side of the coin, which is it can create tremendous pain, gullus,
It's the source of all pain.
we suffer from today. And
Right.
at the end of the day, I will speak about the Rebbe, smarter than all of us, did not have an answer. His answer was that some way God wants us something from us, and it's so valuable to him, he's ready to allow us to make mistakes and even suffer, because ultimately he believes in us and so on. And we don't become cynical and we don't become skeptical. I'm not saying it's easy, but if you're asking me to be direct, especially in times like this, that's the story, really, Shifra.
Right. So, yeah, so they're two different things, or one thing's a part of the other. The question that I'm really looking for is you talked about the clash of philosophies.
About Yishmael. I know
Yishmael, yeah, but I also want to say to what you said, it's true. I think it goes beyond ingenuity. I have the feeling, I'm getting a lot of feelings lately, and like flashes of something or that I can't really explain well in words, but it feels like and this also goes with the question, why is this is the first time in history where we don't have a tzaddik literally talking to us and telling us what to do specifically in this specific situation, in this moment, as far as I know, which is also speaks to that same idea that it feels like that there's a part of us that is so deep and so connected to God and so itself brilliant, not just brilliant in intelligence, but brilliant in light. It's and where we're intrinsically, inexorably, indestructibly connected with God. It seems like that is meant to come out somehow at this time. That's just my feeling.
No, very well said. And I used the word ingenuity. I didn't mean it purely cerebral. I meant all the energy, all the resilience,
potential,
the emotion.
What's inside? Look, yeah.
I thank God I've been blessed in my life, but I meet people who have terrible tragedies they've suffered now, of course, and other times, and I'm in awe, frankly. I completely, when I hear people tell me, I suffered greatly, I lost a child, I lost a parent at a young age, really some of the worst stuff. But I mean, I say, so would you rather have had it? Many will say, but I don't want my life to have been different. Most people would say, hey, I wish it didn't happen. They say that. And I really never wrap my head around it. I respect it. But there's something, I think, that you're alluding to as well. There's some type of depth that comes. It's not just about tshuva versus a tzaddik. The thirst, let's call it. Someone went through tremendous suffering, and they come through on the other side, some type of indestructible strength that they never could have gained. So no one wants it initially. obviously. But after the fact, there is no question there's some type of infinite power that comes through the difficulties of life. Now, it's not that God wanted the difficulties, but it was the only thing that would forge that type of indestructibility. Bottom line is we become eternal, we become godlike, more through our suffering than through our joy, sadly.
So strange, but yeah, it's almost like you squish the person, squish, and then the inside
like
comes out, and the inside is supernatural.
Like the Talmud says, that you get the best oil when you press the olive. Now, we want the pressure to be minimal. I know, because I'm not trying to justify suffering. That's not my point.
Yeah.
But if something happens to us when we're comfortable, where we let go, we become complacent, and the biggest wake-up calls in people's lives have always been crisis, losses, and so on. I don't have an answer why. I'll tell you, using the words of the Rebbe many times said, but you, God, can do it differently. Why'd you have to do it this way? Do it in a less painful way. And there's no answer for that. Because then you're already going into the domain of God himself, where God says to Job, yes, you ask me why there's pain, but you don't ask me why there's joy. You ask me why there's death, but you don't ask me why there's birth. You weren't there when I put it all in place. You weren't there. In other words, you got to go back to the original creator, put it all in place. So I honestly go by this line. I think it's a tremendous line that really I think could be helpful to everyone. When Rabbi Lau, the chief rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, came to America the first time, 1974, right after the Yom Kippur War. He was the rabbi of Netanya. I heard this directly from him. And he was by the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said, what's the mood in Israel? And he said, very, very, people are down. They're very depressed, melancholy. And there's a certain hopelessness because even though the war was won, but first there were the surprises, many casualties, a lot of mistakes were made. And he said, people are asking, what's going to be? What's going to be? What's going to be? The way he told me the story, that the Rebbe grabbed his wrist and said, Rabbi Lau, in Yiddish, he said, in Hebrew, you said, in other words, people say, Ma yiyeh, ma yiyeh. He said, by Yidden don't ask what will be. They ask, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about it? Not ma yiyeh, but ma naseh. Not vos vet zayin, vos geht men ton. I'm saying in all three languages, English, Hebrew, Yiddish. I think it's one of the most important lessons in life. I've seen it many letters as well from the Rebbe. We don't ask why, because we don't always have an answer why. We ask, what are we going to do? I'll tell you what it means. And I've used this very secular psychological settings. I said, it's the ultimate lesson. You're not a victim. When you say why, or you say what's going to be, it's like, not in my hands. What am I going to do? You throw up your hands and you resign yourself. The Rebbe says we're not victims. We always can do something about it. What are you going to do? And it's just empowering and just gives you also a goal to move forward. And by you move forward. We could always get stuck on the why, but we could spend our entire lives asking why and not get anywhere.
So what are the three themes, the three core themes? And if there's a fourth one, you said, Buddhism, Eastern religions, etc. But what are the three, at least, core themes that are battling it out here? Yeah.
Well, good news is that the Christian world is more or less, especially the Christian right, are pretty much in Israel's corner. And they talk about the chosen people all the time. I wish rabbis would talk with the same non-apologetic tone. You've heard these different pastors. But let's lay it out. So you said Abraham is chesed. What does chesed mean? He's here to bring love into the world. What love? The love of God, the love of kindness, the love toward each other. He has two children, Yishmael and Isaac. Yishmael is also chesed, but his chesed is without boundaries, which means doesn't know when to stop. And we know if you don't have gvura, which is a discipline to balance the love, you can end up suffocating people with love too. You can end up killing people with love. You could end up like the water, raindrops has to fall raindrops. If it comes down like a flood, it'll destroy the field just like a drought. So Yishmael, whose name actually means to listen to God, Yishmael, God listened to him. But it was lacking a certain boundaries, and that's what Sarah recognized. Isaac, on the other hand, Yitzchak, is Gvura. Gvura is discipline. It is the balancing force of that chesed, which means that you want to bring God to this world, but you have to do it in a way that's measured. I'll tell a story, I think it will capture it well. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had to hide from the Romans for 12 years because they wanted to kill him for studying and teaching Torah. After 12 years of refinement, he comes out and he sees a petty world. He sees a world that's involved in nonsense. So it says whatever he looked at turned into began to burn. He couldn't tolerate it. And God said to him, no. I didn't create this world for you to destroy it. You have to refine the world, not destroy it. So in his great spirituality, his great love of God became so zealous and so passionate that he was destroying. He was not tolerating anything. So God said, go back into the cave for another year. And this time when he came out, whatever he saw that was not appropriate. In other words, what Yishmael is taking Abraham's great passion for God, but destroying everything in its path. So Yitzchak is that balancing force. So that's Yishmael and Yitzchak. Esav is the opposite. Esav is total gvura without chesed. He's a warrior. He's a warrior that fights, and he needs the balance of chesed. So comes Jacob, is Tiferes in the language of Chassidus. He's the balance. He takes the chesed and gvura of Abraham and Isaac and creates the ultimate harmony. So bottom line is, if you talk about the three so-called ancestors of the three major religions, basically it's a battle between how do we integrate God into this world? Do you do it in a way of just overwhelming everyone with your connection to God? Do you do it in a way with aggression of real wars, like the wars of the Crusaders? Now, actually, Yishmael is involved in that, and I'll talk about that in a moment as well. Or do you find a way to inspire the world? Do you find a way to enlighten, to illuminate, to teach? Abraham prayed for infidels. I did a video last week where I said to my Muslim cousins and friends, what would your grandfather Abraham say now? What would he say to you after what he saw on October 7th? Abraham was a man of love. Abraham was a man who prayed for infidels, God Almighty. He didn't kill them. So the point is, so you have here basically too much chesed, too much gvura, or do we have a balance? And ultimately the challenge is, a lot of the radical atheists say, let's eliminate religion altogether and we won't have wars. Right. So that's the wrong extreme. The key is to find the balance between God and passion. Be passionate, but passion that's harnessed and directed in positive ways. Now, the key, one more thing I want to add is, you have to remember, Esav ultimately marries the daughter of Yishmael. So the Abarbanel, who was a great sage during the time of the Spanish Empire, he talks about that the problems become even more complicated when Esav and Yishmael join together. Then you have yourself a real mess. I mean, that's
so. Does explain what more in more detail? What kind of a mess?
I've written a lot about it. The mess is because now you have too much chesed and too much gvura, and now each one. I'll cite if you wish, if you're interested. It says that when Esav went to marry Yishmael's daughter, so him and Yishmael sat down to negotiate terms, dowry. So Esav says to Yishmael, why don't you kill your brother Isaac? I'll kill my brother Jacob, and we'll be left with the wealth of our grandfather and my grandfather Abraham. And Yishmael says to Esav, you think Cain, who killed his brother Abel? No. And I know the next thing will happen is once I kill your father, Isaac, my brother, you'll be obligated to kill me in vengeance. Goyel Hadam is a law, vengeance. And then you'll be left with all the wealth. I know where you're going with this. So it says that Esav left his bride, and he did not marry her. After Yishmael died, he came back and married her. So the Barbanel says that you're going to find in history where the Christians and the Muslims make a deal. Some people wanted to associate it with when, America gets too much too close to the oil business of the Middle East,
Mm.
you know, whether it's a relationship with Iran or whatever it may be. I don't want to interpret it, over-interpret it, especially now where we need to be, you know, we need to join with the Western world and America especially, meaning Israel and the Jews, to fight our common enemy. But you can see where it gets complicated. The point,
Yeah.
you know, the bottom line is, Shifra, is the main thing. We have to stand proud as Jews. We are here through all these centuries, through all these millennia, to bring the message. We can bring God to this world without war, without violence, without pain. We can bring God, and we need God, because morality cannot stand without a God. Morality becomes a relative, moral relativism, and all the blurring of boundaries of what is right and what is wrong. And we need to revisit, we need to reclaim that clarity. And now we need God more than ever. And who is supposed to bring it to the world? The question was about chosen people. Let me get to that. If I may, I'll say a few words. It's misunderstood. Remember, God chose everybody. Everyone in existence was chosen by God. So what does it mean to be a chosen people? I'll tell you what it means. It means a people, starting with Abraham, who chose God first. Abraham rejected the paganism and idolatry of his parents, of his community, of his culture, and chose a path of God. And God said, here's a man that chooses me. Here's a man that his family chooses me. I have my partner in this world.
Hmm.
And these partners become the people of the book that brought to the world civilization, civility, everything we cherish today, human rights, everything that everyone, freedom, is all based on biblical truth that Abraham propagated. And then it became formalized at Sinai. But remember, it's not meant only for Jews. It's meant to be brought to the entire world. So interestingly, 1,000 years later, you have the birth of Christianity. Then in the 7th century, the birth of Islam. So the children of Esau and the children of Yishmael end up embracing, at least in principle, many of the principles that Abraham taught them. And Maimonides writes that it helps pave the world, but it needs some market correction, because when it gets out of hand, look what happens. So there's no question in my mind that all the nations of the world will join together and serve one God in peace, in harmony within diversity, and that's Mashiach. And we're on the threshold, or after the events of the last few weeks, but that's the narrative, that's the choreography, and we are on that threshold, and we have a major role to play. That's why, as soon as you invited me, I said, absolutely, this is what we need to talk about. There's a real calling here. This is not a, we can't afford to be bystander and say, hey, okay, this is like an opportunity of history. I honestly say this without trying to overstate the case. Abraham, Isaac, Yishmael, Esau, all these people, thousands of years, I think are looking at us right now and saying, what are you going to do, my children?
Well, as you're describing Yishmael merging with Esau, becoming more complicated, it's making me think of the prophecies about Gog and Magog, which the final war. Maybe if you don't mind, you could say a little bit about that. I know in the strictest sense, it's supposed to be Esau, Yishmael, and some of the Jewish people, the Erev Rav, getting together to try to take Jerusalem away from the Jews. But I don't know if you want to go there or not, but can you explain what the sorting out would be? Like, in addition, we should talk about your thoughts on what people should be doing, but also in general, like we have this clash between these world philosophies and ways of being, core spiritual qualities it was meant to be like this. It really fits together because, as you say, we're meant to prove the truth of God's perspective from the inside out in real time. That seems like that's a big part of what we're doing here. So what is the path to untangling this coalition, this anti-God coalition, and bringing the result in a peaceful way?
Well, let me just unpack this a bit. First of all, as far as Gog and Magog, my understanding from the Rebbe and from other authorities is that those battles have been fought already. Talk about World War II, from World War I. But there's still plenty of remaining vestiges that need to be dealt with. Clearly, you see battles going on right now.
Right.
So the general picture is the following: that in the vision of Daniel, where he sees that body made up of different parts.
Explain it just briefly. Please briefly explain, in case people aren't familiar.
So in Daniel, it talks about Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, having a dream where he dreamt of like a clay figure that had a bronze section, that had an iron section. It's a cryptic dream, and Daniel interprets it that it corresponds to the nations of the world, the empires that would unfold, the major empires throughout history. I mentioned before with Abraham's vision as well. So in the prophecies, to be brief, talks much about the empires that would rule the universe. And we talk about all the empires. Others, so extremely violent and brought tremendous carnage and so on. And the end of the story is that after all these empires will rule, ultimately the Mashiach would come and would bring a peace forever and ever, harmony and so on. So in understanding these different stages, it comes down to, as I mentioned before, inherent tension between God, the purpose of existence, God's purpose, and existence itself. Obviously, arrogance, power, wealth, and all that comes with it is antithetical to God. So there's a battle. Religion, healthy religion, Abraham's teachings were meant to find a way to integrate the two without one destroying the other. Because that's the goal. As I said before, the goal is not that God and the name of God, we should destroy the material world. You know, a lot of the Muslim fundamentalism is driven by teachings of Qutb, QUTB, and other thinkers who said we have to destroy the decadent West and their Zionist crusader conspiracy against God. That's his language. So the point is that this battle is one that's been raging throughout history. And frankly, the only way for it to work is to have a balanced understanding. We don't destroy. On a personal level, for example, I may be very passionate about my faith, and I meet you, and you don't really care. I don't mean you, Shifra, I mean any person. And I'm intolerant, and I'm judgmental, and I'm condescending. That's not what God wants. Passion is very beautiful, but channel your passion into inspiration, into love, into kindness. It's not that easy. Religious wars are the most dangerous wars because you're fighting in the name of God.
Yeah.
So basically, the battles of history have been around that. Even the battle between enlightenment, science, and faith, in the last few centuries. So the point being is that being that they're all children of Abraham, meaning Ishmael, ultimately Esau, a grandson of Abraham, they also have a godly side to them, but it may not be fully matured, fully developed. And therefore, it results in many of the wars that we see. So the goal ultimately is the Jewish people are here before everyone, and everything started with Abraham, started with the Jewish people, that we have to teach the world, how do you create that proper balance? Now, as you mentioned, there's an extreme that's completely godless. I'm not going to say Islam is godless. They may have a distorted view of God, and they definitely do. And some of them, not just distorted, they behave in the most ungodly manner in the name of God. Okay, that's obviously complete corruption. But there are people who are godless. There are people who misunderstand God. And I think this is our time to get up and teach the world, what did Abraham want? What does Abraham want of us? He wants us to have faith, but a faith that is healthy, that's integrated, that's internalized, that doesn't destroy, that doesn't, that's not, obviously, that's peaceful. So I don't see any reason why it makes total sense to me that we are at the verge of getting to that, but there are the last gasps of an enemy, of people who don't understand that yet. But I could see the Muslim world being tamed very easily if we did our job.
What's keeping us from doing our job? What's been keeping us from doing our job?
Oh, that's a very good question. First of all, we also have become comfortable. We're pretty comfortable. until things like this happen. And comfort zones are usually not great motivators. I think that's one issue. The blessings of our time have created complacency. Let's be honest. I think that's one thing. Secondly, I think we all are part of the issue. It's not like, yes, I understand there are real murderers out there and savages and everything they did. But we have within our communities, you mentioned before, rifts. There are things we need to do. I'm not blaming that for these events, but we have to get our act together as well, and I look at myself and I say, what can I do on a microcosmic level that can help, build my own little world, a world where I have influence or and connections with, to build a more godly and a more harmonious life, and I think taking the butterfly effect, or the microcosm, macrocosm, the microcosm affects the macrocosm. Maimonides says one good deed, one good word, one good thought tips the scales. So I don't want to, I'd rather, instead of pointing fingers, I'd rather say, what can we do to on a more subtle or microcosmic level that can help bring this type of fusion?
Okay, what can we do? What can we do?
Okay, so let's we go back to the classic basics. There are three pillars upon which this world stands: Torah, Avodah, Gemilas Chasadim. The Mishnah says this. I'll translate Torah, but I'll translate it in more psychological terms. I like to use the word spiritual spa. Spa is an acronym for study, prayer, action. Study is cognitive conditioning, which means every day to study some extra Torah, which means get your mind into another place. Instead of listening to the news, instead of being all caught up on social media, get your mind, study the Word of God, to study some Chumash, some Torah, commentaries, Chitas. You can study Talmud, Daf Yomi, whatever it is. Chassidus obviously brings you to another spiritual place. That's the mind. Then there's emotional conditioning, prayer. Say a prayer, but not just lip service, with intention. Moda'ani in the morning. What a beautiful prayer. Thank you for returning my soul to me. Makes you think about your soul. Why was it sent to this world? Prayer is from the heart. So if Torah is mind, prayer is emotion. And finally, the third thing is actions. Gemilas Chasadim, good deeds. Extra acts of kindness. In addition to gentleness, generosity, gratitude, all those moral qualities, all those beautiful, refined qualities. Basically, what you're doing is turning yourself into a more godly person, a more refined person. And the key thing is not just yourself, influence others. Make sure every day you reach out to at least 5 other people. You want to be more than that, I'm making it manageable. And we can do it through technology. Make sure to send a beautiful email to people. You see something nice, share it. Have your children do the same. Be proactive, not reactive. Not when there's a problem, proactive. Make a plan. We are also part of the battle. We have to be soldiers. We have to be in the military ourselves. There's a physical part of the war, there's the spiritual part of the war. I honestly feel literally mobilized. I feel, that we can't just be business as usual. There's a war. And I think the spiritual war is even more important than the physical war in the long term. The physical war is necessary because we have real enemies ready to do anything, God forbid.
Well, they affect each other.
The spiritual war is a critical one. And I think that is, in my opinion, very much the purpose of this conference and this getting together, is to strengthen that. But I think when you understand also the historical context, the prophecies we talked about, then you understand where your actions are headed. You're not just doing a good deed. Remember, your good deeds are cumulative of all the good deeds that go back thousands of years. I find that to be so empowering, because then I feel like we're midgets on the shoulders of giants. It's not just us. We're adding a little more to what was done over the sacrifices our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents had.
Super important.
We're like the last, that last step that creates the eruption, the good eruption.
That's also why we can count on things not good, that we can say things aren't going backwards, even if people have become complacent or whatever.
Exactly. That's why the Rebbe saw it. There's a combustion chamber of unbelievable, powerful energy, positive energy. but sometimes it needs that last spark to get it really completely generated and to erupt. So there's no question in my mind, after thousands of years, I mean, the fundamental is that all the good deeds that so many people did, billions and billions of mitzvah, they gave their life for it and so on. It did not go, God forbid, to waste. It all changed this world in some way. So though on the surface, we still see these, unfortunately, flare-ups. I don't know if that's the right word. Maybe that's too small of a word, but you know what I mean. You see these terrible things, but overall, remember, Judaism teaches evil does not accumulate, good accumulates. So evil has been erased from the past. It's not like it's an even thing and they're both working right there, and we're ready. That's why I firmly believe when we do an extra good deed, when we speak together like this and come together, the synergy, these things change the universe. This is not shouldn't be seen as a small matter.
It almost, I'm getting kind of a visual as you're speaking. It's almost like the light. If you imagine the earth or the souls, whatever, something on the inside, it's like the light is growing, and the darkness is not growing. The darkness keeps getting transformed into more and more and more light. So it's almost like it's in the visual of the earth, it's like it's pushing up under the surface and pushing out the hidden darkness, which would be what you're calling the flare up. Yeah, I think that's really true. And it's pushing up the hidden goodness also that you told me before we came on live that you've never seen or felt an awakening that like the one that's happening now. So you should speak to that as well.
It's, yeah, unprecedented awakening in so many ways. I mean, first of all, from a Jewish point of view, Jews who only identify as Jew by name are like wondering, what do I stand for? You know, it's not just the anti-Semitism and the attack. I know it touches a nerve, also touches a moral nerve. And I also see it in the larger world, the non-Jewish world. I see people speaking up. It's like really beautiful to see that clarity. People, you know, what is right, what is wrong? Some things are just not acceptable. You know, and also I think the disturbing many is this like, okay, something terrible happened, so now let's figure it out. No, they want to reverse it. They want to blame the victim and make the victim the aggressor. Yeah, there are a lot of people that is like beyond that. You know, it would be like someone saying that the Allies in World War II were the Nazis and the Nazis were the good ones. You know,
no, they've been saying that about Israel for a while now, and about
I understand, but now it's like all amplified.
Yeah,
I wanted to say, since you said a visual, I'll tell you my visual. I look at it like this. I sometimes, when I look into a Maimer Chassidus, and I'm learning Chassidus, I like to think of it like sometimes looking at the world through the lens of God. You know, we look at the world through our eyes, and we look for God through our eyes. Like, what is God seeing exactly? So I'm not, God forbid, I'm not suggesting I know exactly how God sees it. But sometimes learning these things, you have this like bird's eye view. So in a way, this is my visual, if I may. There are 8 billion people on this planet, roughly. 8 billion little candles, little flames, which is what a soul is, that God put on this world, locked it and trapped it into a material body in a material existence. So these flames are like pilot flames. Some of them are not obvious because they're locked, they're trapped. But there are quite a few of them that are shining through their nobility and through their kindness and through their giving and through their unity. You know, a crisis happens now, and some parts of the world get very dark because you don't see the flames. You just see darkness. You see evil. You see atrocities. You see blood. But in other places, the light is starting to get stronger. And if you look at it, I have no doubt there's more light than darkness. The dark corners are very dark. Don't get me wrong. You know, what happened on October 7th was a very dark in south of Israel. No one's going to deny it. But you look at it that way, and so God sees, this is my people here. But I think there's more light in the world today than there was 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago. Yeah. But that doesn't, so when you think of it that way, you say, you know what, if it was a battle plan, I would not say things are good because we have to deal with what we have to deal with. And even one death is too much. But it empowers you. You know, I have a whole battalions, I have armies, I have military behind me of thousands of years. So much light has accumulated. How can we draw on it and help dispel those final pockets and that need to be illuminated?
That's the real question. And I think people have I don't know if we can, I'm hoping that somehow this week it's going to come out in a bigger way, but through the synergy, as you said, but how can that happen? And also, you mentioned the 7 laws for the descendants of Noah for all of humanity. I remember hearing the Rebbe saying one time that those laws are designed to create an inhabitable world, which this one isn't so inhabitable in a lot of ways. So how do you have any thoughts on how that could become,
Well,
how does that light shine forth? And it's not just doing one mitzvah or influencing 5 people.
I understand. I want to take issue a bit with what you just said, if I may, with respect. I think there are definitely places you look at that don't look very good. But when I look at a country like the United States, and I'm not talking about the anti-Semitism or the other things that are really disturbing, but an institutionalized country that was formed 250 years ago. In the scheme of things, it's very, very in its infancy compared to the battles we're talking about. But its principles that the founding fathers established, all men are created equal. Let's say all people are created equal, endowed by their creator with inalienable rights. Right. This is straight Torah language from my point of view, and many have written. That is not to be dismissed. The Rebbe made a big thing about that. He called America Malchus al Chesed, an empire of Chesed, of kindness. Now, this is not the minimizing. There are anti-Semitic attacks. We see the marches. We see the distortions of many of the moral compass completely lost on campuses, and a compass lost on campus. That's a good one. Maybe we can use it somewhere. The point is, I'm not minimizing, but the fact is, before the United States, there were no monarchy. There was no government that institutionalized let's call it Abraham's principles. So I see that, and I'm not saying this just on my own, as a tremendous ray of hope. What is needed is to revisit those foundational principles. We've wandered. Even I live in the United States, away from it. But my hope is because the fact is America did become the most powerful country on earth. And it should go back, not because we're economically so powerful, but because the faith in God we trust is on our currency. And that needs to be actually the number one export from Israel. I honestly believe that Israel has to rise, that we're not just exporting technology and startup nation, and we have all the great gifts that Israel is giving the world, but ultimately, Kimitzian Seitzei Torah v'dvar Hashem Yerushalayim. From Zion will come Torah, God's mandate, and the word of God from Jerusalem, that the world sees that the Jewish people, the Holy Land, is bringing holiness to the entire world. That's the whole point. It was always about bringing holiness to the entire. It wasn't just a self-contained thing for Jews in Israel. It was meant to transform the world. And I think that is the calling of our time, and no question. And I really am very, very, I say this with all, I'm in the same shock and grief over what's going on as all of us. But I really feel this is, to me, much stronger drive, because I feel confident that we can get there. And because we have the capacity. Look, at the end of the day, we cannot forget that you said miracles. This is a miracle. Here, you and I are talking right now. We don't have anyone standing outside censoring our conversation or going to arrest us after this broadcast and send us off to a concentration camp. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So we have tremendous tools. It's not like we're not being marched into gas chambers. We're not at their mercy. So I think that's why it's so important for us to really take advantage, because God will say to you and what did you do? I gave you gifts. I gave you tools. I gave you ability to communicate. I gave you technology. Why didn't you broadcast to 8 billion people my message?
So you're saying, go ahead. I'm sorry. I don't mean, you're sparking me. Go ahead, please.
No. I said what I want. I'm saying, I really feel this in my heart that if I could ignite that type of sentiment in everybody, to me, that changed the world. And not even everybody. You just need enough people to feel that they have to be like ambassadors of God. That's our time. That's our time now. We've always been that way. We understand that. But in a time of crisis, you suddenly realize you have to rise to the occasion.
So that's really, really, really interesting. This perspective you just brought forth, that we never had in times of great trouble, we've never had the extreme opening that we have now, the ability to speak and to reach people easily. So then there's another, I have a question. What is it about Kimitzion Tetzei Torah? What is it about the Torah coming forth from Israel? Because I actually heard a rabbi online this earlier today talking about how people have to be out of Israel, the Jews, in order to be able to influence the non-Jewish nations, etc. And obviously, I want to say there's so many people on this call that are not Jewish, and when we say we are you're part of us. If you're with us, you're with us. So it doesn't. And yeah, and it has to be that there are many more nations and many more non-Jews than there are Jews. They need to know about the basic morality. But how is it that it seems like the only way to get 8 billion people don't listen? Maybe if we had, what does the Fox say had over 1 billion? That I love that video, but it had over 1 billion views. But the only way it seems to me to get attention to this kernel of light that has been so suppressed for so long and so embattled for so long, it seems like it has to be grassroots. It seems like it has to be that, almost like with Moshe, and as the Torah described, that he created leaders of tens and leaders of hundreds and leaders of thousands. And it's how is that something you think about, like how to get each person to be a leader?
Yeah,
to reach?
absolutely.
So how would you structure that?
I totally agree. It's going to be grassroots. It's going to be extremely difficult to go through the bureaucracies in power, from the top down.
People aren't interested anyway. People aren't interested in hearing from, a certain number of people, but.
And even if they are interested, the problem is with the bureaucracies, they have to raise money, they have branding, they get caught up in their own self-interest. Grassroots is the way to go for sure. Technology allows for a grassroots revolution like nothing else.
Yeah.
Because you don't, and it's free. You can broadcast on YouTube and hypothetically 8 billion people could be watching,
Hypothetically.
I think it's grassroots. I think enough of us feel empowered, and then we feel the responsibility to share it with others. Don't be surprised how movements are created that way. And I that's why I keep focusing. I think in a way people need, sometimes tell me the focus. All we need to do is we all embrace that one man, Abraham, that the Bible calls the father of all nations. Father of all nations. Jews, not Jews, all nations. And we all some way connect back to Abraham. I mentioned before in Buddhism, by the way, Brahmin and so on comes from the word Abraham, because Abraham did send some of his children and his students to the east. So we connect. And what does Abraham stand for? Everything we cherish. Freedom, rights, love, kindness. I mean, you go on. That's what he stood for. And
I just got goosebumps.
Yeah. And that's why last week I mentioned before, I did a video called A Call to My Muslim Cousins and Friends. What would Abraham say? It's your grandfather. I'm not telling you, it's your grandfather. And Abraham, in a way, precedes even Judaism. Because was he a Jew? Was he not a Jew?
Was it Ger?
He was a universal man that went against he was a nonconformist, a pioneer that said life is more than just about me. Life is about a higher calling. And that higher calling means it's a life of service. It's a life of giving. It's not a life of arrogance and ego. So that's a message also that is not even controversial, frankly.
Well, it's also you made me think about the Abraham Accords. For branding purposes, a movement that is based around Abraham could be a grassroots movement. It's kind of genius, also because, as you've been saying, it includes everybody. Do they have? I started listening, but I didn't have a chance because I've been busy prepping to this conversation you had with the Muslim. Do they? I mean, he was from England, so he's not out there in Gaza.
Born in Bangladesh, yeah.
Do they have when you would ask, if you would ask a Christian or a Muslim, in your opinion, doesn't have to be specific, what would they say, do you think? Do they relate to Abraham?
Absolutely. Well, especially devout Christians and devout Muslims for sure. Obviously they have their prophets and everyone refers to them, but But everybody knows that Abraham was the first. That's not even a question, because it's in all their texts, whether it's in the New Testament or in the Quran, and they're it's all there. They do. I haven't done any polls, but when I spoke with the Muslim that you mentioned and others, they related very well.
What is their inheritance as they see it? Like, what would Abraham think? What would he say from their perspective?
Well, this particular Muslim that I had a conversation with, that's online now, he basically wrote actually an open letter to his Muslim colleagues using Abraham. They all, Abraham clearly was a man of no violence. Okay, let's put it this way: he would not touch a man, woman, or child. It's just non-existent. He was all about love and kindness, even to strangers.
He did fight and rescue against the kings. He fought and rescued his nephew.
Okay, no, you had to listen when you have
the
to go to
defensive
battle,
war he would do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, that I understand, of course. But then he opens his door. God is speaking to him, and he sees 3 nomads in the desert, and he turns to them and greets them. So it wasn't a matter of just that was what he. So I can't say how prominent and dominant it is in modern religious culture, but to me that is definitely the place to begin, because it all starts there. Abraham is a man that reverses the trend of a corrupt world to bring God back into the world. So many ways we're doing his job now. We're finishing what he began.
And did he have a system? I know it says
grassroots, by the way. He was grassroots. He talked to everyone he could talk to.
Right.
That's what it says. And he opened his tent. He opened his home.
Did he teach? Did he have a morality that he taught, or a moral system, or did he just teach people to recognize that there's a God and to thank God and so forth? No.
He taught remember mentioned the 7 Noahide laws. So Noah is the great grandfather of Abraham's.
Yeah.
And so there was a tradition of the 7 moral laws that is the foundation of civilization. I should mention what they are.
Yes, you should.
There's a God, and that you should honor God and not use profanities in the name of God. Number that's 2. 3 is sexual morality, meaning everything that comes with that. Number 4 is respect for other people's lives, no murder. 5 is respect for people's property, meaning no theft. Establishing laws of justice, accountability and justice. And finally, respecting the environment, respecting animals, the technical is not to eat a limb of a live animal, but it really is much broader than that. It means being kind to the creatures of this world, not just humans. So if everybody followed those 7, really, we'd have Mashiach here already.
Well,
people dismiss it sometimes. It's 7. It's the 7 foundations of life, if you think about it.
And also people can, once you're on that path, you are certainly eligible to learn more and to get closer to God and
of course, each of them have subsets.
Right.
Subsets and details. I mean, some of the commentators say that the 7 break down to 90 when you really get into the details.
Wow. Bottom
line is, in one word, it's not a life driven by your id, using Freudian language, by survival of the fittest. It's not about me. It's about you. It's about being a giver instead of a taker. It's about serving. It's about higher calling, about transcendence versus selfishness and narcissism. Everyone understands exactly what it is, because we all know in our hearts what we usually choose, and that's the battle. And
I've kept you extra time, but I do have 2 more questions. I mean,
I will say this. Being that I'm speaking a lot and I have many Muslim listeners, there was a Palestinian that called me last week. He's a fan of mine. He listens to my videos, but he's not agreeing, obviously, with these ideas. He feels Israel's the aggressor and so on. So I asked him, I said, what would Abraham say? What would Abraham say? And he was flustered a bit. He didn't have an answer for that. But the point I'm saying is, I saw a person who was brainwashed. I felt bad for him, to be honest. He completely has a whole other narrative. It's like someone who's programmed by a cult. Right. Completely programmed by a cult. And he was respectful to me. He wasn't like yelling at me or calling me names. He was respectful. And I said to him, is it possible that you may be wrong in your narrative? You know, and my point I wanted to say was I was trying to introduce him to the concept of bittul in Chassidus. Bittul means it's not all about you. You may have a wrong perception. Interestingly, he didn't say to me, maybe you're wrong. He didn't say that because he had respect. But the point is, if you don't have that capacity, then what you're lacking is exactly what I said before. You may have a love for God, but you're too much. It's too much about you. You have it all figured out. Where's the humility? Where's your humility? You know,
I have to
how
say,
how you know? I'll just say something which is to me so obvious. You love God. How could you touch God's child? How could you touch in any way God's children? You're a grandson of Abraham. How could you touch Abraham's other children? What? How do you justify that? How can you? So to me, that means they have a complete dissonance.
see, I don't think they're, I don't want to confuse anybody about what I think should be happening, which is the Torah is very clear on what we need to do here at this point, to make the country safe, the people safe, but and it's very disconcerting to me to know for a while now, after living here, that, for example, the Israeli government allowed, at least at minimum, allowed programs that they could have shut down that falsely show, Israeli soldiers torturing Muslim kids and all kinds of things that the propaganda could have and should have been shut down, just like the terror tunnels. There's like, it makes me feel like, and I've thought this many, many times throughout the years, that God gives us certain things together with certain powers and privileges together with intense responsibilities. And if we don't take those powers and privileges and use them in a holy way, they get co-opted by the other side and used in a very unholy way, twisted against us. Like somebody just said, the Abraham Accord is an agreement between corrupt nations. There's corruption where there's not light. There's corruption where there's not leadership. There's exploitation. We need to take back what's ours. And I mean, not just the Jewish people, all decent people, all children of Abraham who want to be authentic descendants of Abraham on a spiritual as well as every other level. We need to take back what's ours, and we need to use it in the right way. That is everyone's responsibility.
Agreed.
And governments,
Absolutely.
by the way, are a reflection of the people. Governments get voted in, and even if they're voted in corrupt elections, how many of us, had other things to do rather than take leadership, and I'm not saying we're all responsible for politics. At the end of the day, everything that happened is divine providence. But the question is, now who are we going to be? And I think this is what you're saying, Simon. I think this is right.
Yeah, definitely part of it. Yes, absolutely. Well, look, if everyone listening to this program would just feel that you're not an observer or a bystander or a spectator,
yes,
feel responsibility that you need to do something in your circle, that to me would be a major success. Because remember, there's only 5 degrees of separation between us, whatever that number is. And it all starts with a ripple effect.
right.
If you can shift that, that's, and become that ambassador of light, share, pass on, inspire. What stops you this week? Take a day in this week, invite all your friends in your community to come to your home, someone else's home, have a few nice drinks, refreshments, talk about God, talk about purpose, talk about goodness, talk about the events in the world, but not the politics of it and the
something each one of us
what we should be doing.
Right.
Yes, Abraham would be very proud of that.
Parlor meetings is an awesome idea. It takes some work, but it's an awesome idea. I'm even thinking that maybe later in the week we should have an open Zoom where we, in between, we should be thinking about this and how could it happen and how could it spread and how could, leaders of 10 support those 10 in creating parlor meetings or whatever it is that we do.
And if you need an additional incentive, think of your children. They see you do that in your home.
Yeah.
The biggest lesson you can tell them, what did I do?
They're activists forever.
Right.
Yeah, they're leaders forever. Yeah, it's true. Wow. So much to think about. Okay, I know I've kept you way over time, but because this question was asked by a few people in the beginning, do you have any suggestions for dealing with fear and for dealing with the pain?
Dealing with fear is the key thing, is to connect to something. You can't just push fear out of your system. Try it out. You're afraid, you're going to sit down and push it out. You can't. Just like you can't fight darkness with artillery, with weapons. The key is to bring into your life something that's more powerful than fear, the things you believe in. I would say make a list of the 3 things you're absolutely certain of, that you believe in, that you're ready to fight for. You could say the love of my family. You could say certain values that you have to bring into your life something that will be more powerful than the fear. Well, I'll talk about myself. I've heard the events, and of course, I don't feel fear. You know why? Because I'm filled with this type of hope and also commitment, which brings me.
You're in action.
Right. I have work to do. I had to be on this conference today. I have no time for fear right now when I'm sitting with you and talking to you.
Yeah.
So it's like a soldier in the front lines. Do they have fear in their heart if they stop? Yes. If you stop and do nothing, we get very afraid. Sometimes you just have to leap in and be active. Be active, even if you're not in the mood. That is, to me, the biggest counter for fear.
When you're God's partner, you're God's partner.
Yeah, exactly. So therefore, meditations or exercises, obviously you can run, do some physical activity, swim, or something that may get rid of some stress. But at the end of the day, that's temporary. It's not going to be, you want something that you have a cause. Like if you had to plan today an event in your home, like I mentioned, a parlor meeting or any type of meeting, you're not going to have time for fear. You have to make a plan. You have to order food. You have to invite people. It's. I know it sounds
lifts
so
you up.
but,
no, it's so true. It lifts you up like in a completely miraculous way. It's like you go into a God zone where you're protected because you're in the fight.
And it's also not optional. Once you're doing it, I got to do it. It's not like that way your moods don't have an effect because I have to do it. That's it. It's
you make a commitment, right? Somebody here just wrote that she was visited by some witnesses, and she told them about the 7 mitzvahs, and they're coming back next week. I love that. And then Vanessa, and then she said there's some weird Christian stories going around about implementing the Noahide laws, that it means the Christians will be killed if they don't give up their worship, which is really, really interesting because there are so many misunderstandings now with just another topic. But I want to say to all of our non-Jewish friends,
we have enough killing than we need, more killing than we need. There's no killings left.
Right. But I would just want to say that you guys, if you're not Jewish, you have you could create so much influence in such big ways that I think Jews don't necessarily have direct access to. So it's like people have asked, what's the role of the non-Jew, the Noahide, or whatever you want to call yourself? The role of the non-Jew is to bring truth, godliness, justice, and righteousness and redemption to the world, and specifically through the Torah. What do you want to add to that?
Yeah, remember, God is not Jewish or God is beyond it. We're all God's children. We're all God's messengers. Absolutely.
And Adam was one. We were all created one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
okay.
Abraham, again, is the father of all nations. Abraham's the father of all nations.
I love it. This has to be pursued. So I've mentioned this. We've mentioned this. We've talked about it. Be in touch, maybe by email, with me if it's something that you're seriously interested in. Not if you would come, if it happened, like, if we did a Zoom, I would want people who are ready to be leaders of 10s or leaders of 100s to participate. So yeah, you can let me know. Judy's inviting people to Rosh Chodesh celebration. Okay. Any last things? I know that we have a lot more to say, but time is running out.
I honestly believe when the annals of history will be written, this time will be looked at both from above and future generations. What did we do? And I, for one, would like to say that we will say we did not remain silent in the face of atrocities. We stood up and we were the best we could possibly be. I really say this without absolutely what I feel. This is the time that we have to shine like human beings have never shined before. Take all our freedoms and our blessings and technologies and demonstrate what it means to be a divine soul, someone created in the divine image. And that, by contrast, will expose all those that are doing the opposite. So we should stand up, and that's what happens. If you don't stand up, you don't know who's who. If we all stand up in the name of Abraham, you'll know. It'll become very clear who's, like Elijah said, who is in the camp of God and who's against God.
Yeah.
And I'm not looking here to categorize anybody, but this is the time. This is our time. I say this to Jew and non-Jew alike. I say this is the time where you will be asked, what did you stand up for? And this doesn't mean we make our mistakes, but there's right and wrong, there's justice, there's beauty, there's God in this world, and this is it. I mean, I can't overstate this.
Yes, yes, this is it. Okay, thank you so much. I feel like we've just started, but
Yeah, the
so
time
good.
flew. It's like 2 hours almost. Yeah.
Yep, yep, yep.
But Shifra, thank you for always keeping the fire burning and keeping us aware, and inviting me, and having the opportunity to be able to share these words. And may we create that spiritual revolution, and ultimately usher in that world of harmony, of peace, no more war.
Accord between all the children of Abraham. True accord.
Well said.
Amen.
Yes. A world.
Amen.
Where it says, I'll conclude with a verse from Isaiah that says, there will be no more evil and no more destruction on my holy mountain, because the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea.
Amen. May we see it so beyond, faster than we could possibly imagine, faster than we could possibly imagine. At some point, the birth has to happen, even if the labor's long. All right, we'll leave the Zoom up for a little while just because people are sharing information. We do have a call in half an hour. So I'll come on 5 minutes early. Maybe I won't be able to because I'll be with the speaker. Well, anyway, come on a little bit early and bring any questions that didn't get answered. And thank you so much, Simon. So
thank you. So
onward and upward.
Thank you, everyone. I'll sign off now. Be well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.